A janitor overhears a secret that could destroy an empire. Will she bring the elite to their knees? Subscribe and hit the bell for our latest videos. The boardroom of Global Trust Corp crackled with fury, a glittering cage of glass and steel where 12 white executives in bespoke suits clawed at each other like wolves. Their voices a venomous roar over billions in dirty money, oblivious to Grace Adebayo, the black janitor they had scorned for months, who stood in the shadows, her mop tracing silent arcs across the marble floor, her pulse thundering like a storm, because tonight she wasn't scrubbing stains, she was tearing down an empire. Her faded uniform hung loose, her presence as dismissible as the crumbs they left on the table, but the earpiece in her ear, masked as a cheap headphone, recorded every word, beaming it to a UN server in Geneva, where her team at the International Financial Crime Agency held their breath for her signal. Knowing Grace, their director, could topple nations with a single code. She'd swallowed their racist taunts, their spilled whiskey, their laughter at her slow work, all to infiltrate this den of thieves. And now, as CEO Richard Harlan, his silver hair slick with sweat, slammed his fist on the mahogany table, barking at the CFO, "Marcus, you swore the pension fund was buried. How did $2 billion vanish?" Grace's heart lurched, her fingers tightening on the mop handle, because that was it, the slip she'd hunted for 6 months. The proof Global Trust wasn't just washing cartel cash, but stealing from its workers' futures. A crime so brazen it lit a fire in her veins, though her face stayed blank, her movement steady as she sloshed the mop in the bucket, masking the faint click of her earpiece as she alerted her team. Her mind blazed, linking Harlan's words to the encrypted files she'd hacked from deleted servers. The shell companies she'd traced to Dubai, every piece locking into a mosaic of corruption that could crush Global Trust's global web. But danger crashed in like a tidal wave. Heavy boots echoed behind her. And before she could react, 2 corrupt cops hulking, their badges tarnished by Global Trust's bribes, seized her arms, their fingers digging into her flesh. One snarling, eavesdropping, "You're coming with us." The boardroom froze, all eyes on Grace as the cops dragged her into the light. Harlan's gaze slicing through her, his voice a low growl. "What did you hear, janitor?" Her pulse roared, her MI6 training screaming to stay calm, but her fingers grazed the encrypted phone in her pocket. The key to unleashing hell on these men. The cops shoved her against the table, one drawing a baton, its metal glinting, and hissed, "Talk, or you won't walk out of here." The room felt like a noose, every second a razor's edge. But Grace had faced death before, assassins in Lagos, traitors in Beijing, and she wasn't breaking now. She let her shoulders slump, her voice quaver. "I didn't hear nothing, sir, just cleaning." But her eyes locked on the bed, calculating its arc. Her body pulled like a spring. Harlan leaned closer, his breath hot with whiskey. "Search her." And the second cop reached for her bag, inches from the micro camera sewn into its lining, the device that could expose her as Grace Adebayo, the woman who could freeze their fortunes with a word. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. In a flash, Grace stumbled deliberately, her foot kicking the mop bucket, sending a flood of soapy water across the floor. The cops slipping, cursing, their grip loosening for a heartbeat. She seized the moment, twisting free, her elbow slamming into the first cop's jaw with surgical precision, a muffled crack lost in the chaos. Her movement so swift the board barely registered it. The second cop lunged, baton swinging, but Grace ducked, grabbing a glass decanter from the table and hurling it at the wall, the shatter deafening, glass raining down, buying her seconds as she bolted for the door. Harlan's shout, get her ringing in her ears. She dove into the hallway, the cop's boots pounding behind. But Grace was a ghost, slipping into a service stairwell, her fingers flying over her phone to type the code 71932. The message rocketed to Geneva, triggering an audit that would lock Global Trust's assets by dawn, a guillotine poised to fall. But Grace wasn't done. In a calculated gamble, she dropped her earpiece on the stairwell floor, its tiny UN insignia glinting under the light, a deliberate clue to rattle the board, to let them know someone with power was watching. Her breath ragged, she vanished into the building's maze, the cops searching the wrong wing, her escape a defiance of death itself. She'd survived, but the war had begun. The woman they'd laughed at had just fired the first shot. The fluorescent buzz of the Global Trust Corp basement hummed like a wasp nest, a stark contrast to the opulent boardroom Grace Adebayo had fled hours ago, her heart still racing from the clash with the corrupt cops, her mind a whirlwind of strategy as she pushed a cleaning cart through the dimly lit service corridor, the squeak of its wheels a metronome to her thoughts. Because now, with the international audit triggered, every move was a step on a tightrope over a pit of vipers. Her janitor's uniform, stained and frayed, cloaked her true identity, director of the UN's International Financial Crime Agency. A woman who could cripple economies with a single command, but here, in the underbelly of the skyscraper, she was just another invisible worker. Or so she needed them to believe. Though the weight of her mission pressed against her chest, heavier than the encrypted phone taped to her thigh, its faint warmth a reminder of the code she'd sent to Geneva, the 71932 that would unleash Interpol by dawn. Last night's escape had been too close. The cops' batons inches from her skull, the boardroom's glass walls a heartbeat from becoming her cage. But Grace thrived in the crucible of danger, her MI6 training and Lagos-honed instincts turning fear into fuel. And now she had a new target, the CEO's personal server, rumored to hold the unredacted files of Global Trust's pension fund heist, the key to nailing Richard Harlan and his cabal. She'd mapped the building's security blind spots over months, memorizing guard rotations, camera angles, and the rhythm of the night shift. And tonight, with the board still reeling from her planted earpiece, a deliberate taunt to rattle their nerves, she had a narrow window to breach Harlan's office. The service elevator groaned as it carried her to the executive floor, her reflection in its scratched metal doors showing a face etched with resolve, her dark eyes burning with the memory of her family's ruin in Nigeria, a loss that drove her to dismantle empires like Global Trust. Brick by bloody brick, the elevator dinged, and she stepped into the plush hallway, the air thick with the scent of leather and power. Her cart's clatter a disguise as she approached Harlan's corner office. Its glass door locked, but no match for the micro tool hidden in her mop handle, a device that bypassed the keypad in seconds. Inside, the office was a shrine to ego mahogany desk, city skyline view, a computer humming softly, its screen dark but alive with secrets. Grace's pulse quickened as she plugged a flash drive, disguised as a keychain, into the system. Its custom malware designed by her hacker team in Seoul, slicing through encryption like a hot knife, pulling deleted files from the server's depths, each one a thread in the tapestry of Global Trust's crime shell companies in the Caymans, transfers to cartel fronts, and, buried deep, a ledger detailing the $2 billion pension fund theft, signed off by Harlan himself. Her breath hitched, the enormity of the find electrifying. But time was a predator, and she felt its teeth as the download ticked past 3 minutes, her earpiece crackling with static, a warning from her team that security was tightening after the boardroom chaos. Then, a new threat emerged. Lila, a fellow janitor, a chatty woman with a kind smile but prying eyes, appeared at the door, her voice a mix of confusion and curiosity. Grace, what are you doing in the boss's office? You know we ain't allowed up here. Grace's stomach nodded, her hand hovering over the flash drive, her mind racing to defuse the situation. Because Lila wasn't just a co-worker, she was a potential leak, someone whose innocent questions could unravel 6 months of work. She forced a tired laugh, her voice low. Just fixing a spill, some exec trashed the place. But Lila's gaze lingered on the computer, the glowing screen, and Grace saw the spark of doubt, the same spark she'd seen in the cop's eyes before they grabbed her. Lila stepped closer, her tone sharper. You're always sneaking around, Grace, with that earpiece, those late shifts. What's your deal? The air thickened, Grace's training screaming to neutralize the threat. But Lila wasn't an enemy, just a woman caught in the wrong moment, and Grace couldn't afford blood on her hands. Not now. She yanked the flash drive free, the download complete, and moved toward the door, her shoulder brushing Lila's, her voice a whisper. Don't ask questions you can't handle. Lila, go home. But Lila's hand grazed her arm, insistent, and Grace felt the walls closing in, the weight of her double-life special agent by night, nobody by day crushing her, because one wrong word from Lila could tip off security, could bring Harlan's hired muscle crashing down. She slipped into the hallway, her card a shield, but Lila's footsteps followed, soft but relentless, and Grace knew she'd just gained another shadow, one she couldn't shake without risking her mission or her soul. Back in the basement, she uploaded the files to her team, her fingers trembling as she typed a new message. Evidence secured. Expect blowback. The reply was instant. They're hunting. Stay sharp. Grace leaned against the cold concrete wall, her breath ragged, the line between her two lives blurring, knowing that by morning, Global Trust would tighten its noose, and she'd have to dance faster to stay alive. The air in Global Trust Corp's skyscraper felt charged with paranoia. The sleek corridors and glass offices buzzing with the fallout of Grace Adebayo's invisible strike. Her coded message to Geneva having unleashed an international audit that now gnawed at the edges of the company's empire. Though she pushed her cleaning cart through the basement like nothing had changed. Her janitor's uniform a perfect mask for the UN special agent who held the power to bury them all. Her heart pounding with the knowledge that every step was a gamble. Every glance a potential death sentence. The boardroom clash and her office hack had left scars Lila's prying questions. The cops' bruising grips. The earpiece she'd dropped to taunt the board, but Grace thrived in chaos. Her MI6 training and Lagos-bred grit forging her into a weapon. And now, with the audit squeezing Global Trust's accounts, she needed one final piece to seal their fate, a physical document. A signed contract linking the pension fund theft to Harlan's inner circle, rumored to be locked in the CFO's office. The morning shift was a blur of routine mopping floors, emptying bins, dodging the sneers of executives who saw her as less than human, but her mind was a war room, mapping the CFO's schedule, his late-night habits, the security cameras she'd memorized over months, because tonight, while the board scrambled to shred evidence, she'd strike again. The news had broken at noon. Regulators in London and New York were probing Global Trust's accounts, a direct hit from her 71932 code, and the office pulsed with panic. Assistants scurrying, phones ringing, Harlan's voice barking through closed doors. Find the leak. Now Grace kept her head down, her earpiece feeding her updates from her Geneva team bank accounts frozen in Zurich. Interpol mobilizing in Dubai, but the weight of her double life pressed harder. Lila's suspicious glances from across the break room a constant threat. Her co-worker's silence more dangerous than words. And Grace knew she couldn't afford another slip. By midnight, the building thinned. The executive floor a ghost town save for the CFO. Marcus Trent, holed up in his office, his desk lamp a beacon in the dark. Grace slipped into the service stairwell, her micro toolkit hidden in her shoe, her pulse steady as she bypassed the office's keypad, the lock clicking open with a whisper, the room a fortress of files and secrets. She moved like a shadow and her gloved hands rifling through drawers, her micro camera stitched into her sleeve snapping photos of a contract, its pages detailing transfers from the pension fund to a cartel front, Trent's signature scrawled in black ink, the smoking gun she needed to bury Global Trust for good. Her breath caught, the thrill of victory electric, but fate was a cruel hunter. The door swung open, and Trent himself stood there, his tie loosened, eyes wild with stress, his voice a snarl. "What the hell are you doing in my office?" Grace froze, her camera still raised, the contract glowing under the desk lamp. her mind racing as Trent lunged forward, grabbing her wrist, his grip iron, his shout echoing, "You're the leak, aren't you?" The room shrank to a pinpoint, every second a blade. But Grace was no prey. She'd faced worse in Moscow's back alleys, in Lagos's slums, and she let her body go limp, her voice trembling. "I got lost, sir, cleaning the wrong floor." But Trent wasn't buying it, his other hand reaching for his phone, likely to call security. Or worse, the hired muscle Harlan kept on speed dial. Her training surged, her free hand slipping to the micro tool in her pocket, a pen-shaped device with a stun tip. But she couldn't risk exposure. Not yet. So she pivoted, using Trent's momentum to twist free, her foot sweeping his ankle, sending him crashing into a filing cabinet, the thud masked by the hum of the AC. She bolted for the door, but not before the contract slipped from her grasp, fluttering to the floor. Its corner marked by her glove's smudge, a tiny damning clue she hadn't meant to leave. The hallway swallowed her, her cart abandoned as she dove into a maintenance closet, her breath ragged, her earpiece crackling with her team's warning. "Security's on alert, get out now." Trent's shouts faded, but Grace knew the smudge would haunt her, a breadcrumb for a man like Vincent Cole, the security chief, whose CIA-honed instincts would sniff out an insider. She slipped to the basement, her hands shaking as she uploaded the photos to Geneva. The contract's images sharp and undeniable. Her message to her team curt, "Got it. They're closing in." The reply was grim, extractive, compromised. But Grace wasn't running, not when she was this close. Not when Harlan's empire was crumbling under her hand. She leaned against the concrete wall, the smudge on the contract replaying in her mind. A mistake that could unravel her, but also a spark to fuel the board's paranoia, to make them turn on each other. Her double life was a house of cards. Lila's doubts, Trent's rage, and Cole's hunt tightening the noose. But Grace Adebayo was no ordinary woman, she was the storm, and Global Trust was about to feel her wrath. The Global Trust Corp Tower loomed like a predator in the pre-dawn haze, its glass facade reflecting the first glimmers of a city unaware of the war brewing within. Where Grace Adebayo pushed her cleaning cart through the basement's flickering lights, her janitor's uniform, a fraying shield for the UN special agent who'd set an empire ablaze. Her heart a drumbeat of dread because the smudge she'd left on the CFO's contract last night was a crack in her armor. And now, with Lila's suspicious stares burning holes in her back, the weight of her double life felt like a noose tightening with every step. The international audit she'd triggered was ripping through Global Trust's accounts, freezing assets in Singapore and Panama. Her 71932 code, a silent earthquake that had Harlan and his board scrambling, their panic seeping into every corner of the building, from the executive's hushed whispers to the security chief Vincent Cole's prowling patrols. His CIA-trained eyes hunting for the insider, Grace knew they'd never suspect a black janitor they'd dismissed as nothing. But suspicion was a virus, and Lila had caught it. Her once friendly chatter replaced by sharp glances. Her questions about Grace's late shifts, an earpiece cutting too close. And Grace felt the betrayal brewing, a gut punch she couldn't dodge. Because Lila wasn't just a co-worker, she was a single mother, desperate. The kind of person Global Trust preyed on with promises of cash for loyalty. The morning shift dragged, Grace mopping the lobby, her earpiece feeding her updates from Geneva Interpol raids planned for dusk. The pension fund contract photos verified, but her focus shattered when Lila cornered her in the break room. Her voice low. "I told management about you. Grace, the office, the sneaking they're offering 10 grand for tips on the leak, and I need it." The words hit like a blade, Grace's stomach twisting, her training screaming to stay calm. But the sting of Lila's choice burned, a reminder of the world's cruelty, the same cruelty that had destroyed her family in Lagos and fueled her mission to gut empires like Global Trust. Before she could respond, 2 security guards, Cole's men, their fate as hard as stone, flanked her, their hands on her arms, dragging her to a windowless interrogation room in the basement. the door slamming shut with a clang that echoed like a coffin lid. Vincent Cole sat across a steel table, his eyes cold, a manila folder open to a photo of the smudged contract. His voice a razor. "You are in Trent's office. You're no janitor. Who are you working for?" Grace's pulse roared, her wrists aching under the guard's grip. But she'd faced worse cartel interrogators, rogue spies, and she knew Cole was fishing. His evidence thin, the smudge not enough to break her cover. She slumped, her voice trembling. "I'm nobody, sir, just cleaning, I swear." But her mind was a storm, calculating exits, weaknesses, the stun pen in her shoe, the encrypted phone still taped to her thigh, its panic button a last resort that would blow her mission wide open. Cole leaned closer, his breath sour. "We found your earpiece in the stairwell, UN markings. Talk, or you disappear." The room felt like a vice, every second a test of her soul. But Grace saw a crack in Cole's armor, his mention of the board's infighting. Harlan blaming Trent, Trent blaming the VP, and she seized it, her voice soft. "If I'm the leak, why's your boss pointing fingers at his own? Maybe check Trent's offshore accounts before you waste time on me." The lie was a gamble, planted to sow chaos. And it landed. Cole's eyes flickered, doubt creeping in, because Grace knew men like him thrived on control, and global trust was fracturing from within. He waved a hand, and the guards loosened their hold. But one reached for her bag, his fingers brushing the lining where her microcamera hid, and Grace's heart stopped, her body tensing for a fight she couldn't win without blood. In a desperate play, she let her knees buckle, faking a faint, her body slumping to the floor, the guards cursing as they scrambled to lift her, giving her the split second to slip the camera into her sleeve, her fingers trembling, but precise. Cole barked, "Get her up," but Grace kept her eyes half closed, her breathing shallow, buying time as he stormed out, muttering about checking Trent's files, her seed of discord taking root. The guards hauled her to the break room, tossing her onto a chair, their radios crackling with Cole's orders to watch her. But they didn't cuff her, didn't search deeper, and Grace knew she'd dodged a bullet. Though the war was far from won, alone, she slipped to a utility closet, her hands shaking as she sent a coded message to Geneva interrogated. "Cover intact. Plant discord." The reply was stark. "They're hiring muscle. Evade or extract." Grace leaned against the wall. Lila's betrayal a fresh wound. Cole's hunt a closing trap. But the contract photos were in play. The audit was unstoppable. And she'd just turned the board against itself. Her double life was a house of glass, one crack from shattering. But Grace Adebayo was no victim, she was the blade. And global trust would bleed. The Global Trust Corp tower stood like a wounded beast under the gray dawn, its glass walls reflecting a city stirring with whispers of scandal. While inside, Grace Adebayo maneuvered her cleaning cart through the service tunnels, her janitor's uniform a tattered veil for the UN special agent who'd ignited a financial firestorm. Her pulse a relentless drumbeat because the international audit she'd unleashed was no longer a distant threat, it was a guillotine, slicing through Global Trust's accounts, freezing billions in London, Dubai, and Hong Kong. Her 71932 code, a silent detonation that had the board in freefall, though the weight of Lila's betrayal and Cole's interrogation clung to her like damp rot, a reminder that her cover was fraying, and one false step could end her. The basement air was thick with the tang of bleach and fear. Her earpiece crackling with updates from Geneva Interpol was hours from raiding. The pension fund contract photos had sparked arrests in Zurich, but Grace's focus was razor-sharp on a new lead, a cryptic email she'd intercepted from Harlan's server, hinting at a last-ditch plan to siphon the remaining pension funds to a cartel-linked account in Belize before the audit locked it down. Her heart surged, the audacity of Harlan's greed fueling her, because this wasn't just a crime, it was a middle finger to the workers he'd robbed. The kind of arrogance that had destroyed her family in Lagos. and she'd be damned if he slipped away. Her MI6 training in Lagos grit had carried her through boardroom brawls and basement interrogations. But this required finesse, a trap to catch a snake, and she'd need her sole hacker team to pull it off. The morning shift was a gauntlet mopping floors, dodging Cole's security goons, their radios buzzing with orders to find the rat, and Lila's absence in the break room was a ghost, her betrayal a wound that stung, though Grace couldn't afford to dwell, not when her encrypted phone, taped to her thigh, vibrated with a message from Sol Belize's account active. Transfer queued for 3 p.m. Her mind raced, cross-referencing the email with her stolen ledger, confirming Harlan's plan to flee by private jet at dusk. The funds his golden parachute? But she could choke his escape by rerouting the transfer to a UN-monitored account, a digital ambush that would leave him penniless and exposed. She slipped into a utility closet, her fingers flying over the phone to coordinate with Sol, their malware ready to hijack the transaction. But time was a predator, and she felt its claws as she rejoined her shift, her card a shield against prying eyes. Though a new shadow loomed a man in a gray hoodie, his gait too deliberate, his eyes too focused, trailing her from the lobby to the service elevator, his presence screaming hired muscle, a killer sent by Harlan or Cole to silence the leak. Her pulse spiked, her training kicking in, because this wasn't one of Cole's bumbling guards, this was a professional, likely ex-special forces, the kind who'd slit her throat and vanished before the blood hit the floor. The elevator's hum was a countdown, her reflection in its dented doors showing a face carved with resolve, her hand brushing the stun pen in her shoe, a weapon too weak for a fight she might not avoid. She exited on the 5th floor, weaving through cubicles, the man's footsteps a soft echo, his shadow flickering in the glass partitions. And Grace knew she couldn't outrun him forever, not with the transfer trap set for 3 p.m., not with Interpol counting on her evidence. She ducked into a copy room, its hum of machines a cover as she typed a coded alert to Geneva Hostel on me. Need diversion. The reply was instant. Sol's rerouting now. Hold position. But holding wasn't an option. The man's silhouette filled the doorway, his hand slipping under his jacket, likely for a silenced pistol. And Grace's heart roared, her body coiling as she grabbed a stack of paper, hurling it at his face. The explosion of sheets buying her a second to lunge past, her shoulder slamming into his chest, her speed a blur as she bolted for the stairwell, his curse echoing behind her. The stairwell was a maze of concrete and echoes, her boots pounding, his pursuit relentless. But Grace knew the building's veins, diving into a ventilation shaft, its metal walls scraping her skin as she crawled, her breath ragged, the phone vibrating with Sol's confirmation. Transfer rerouted, Belize's account locked. She'd done it. Harlan's escape was gutted. The funds safe in UN hands, but the assassin was still out there, his shadow a promise of death. And Cole's hunt was closing in, the smudge, the earpiece, and Lila's betrayal painting a target on her back. She emerged in the basement, her hands trembling as she sent a final message to Geneva Trap set. Hostile active, advise. The reply was a knife evade, raids at 6 p.m. Grace pressed against the cold wall, the assassin's footsteps a distant drum, her double life a house of ash. But Harlan's plan was dead, and she'd lit the fuse for Global Trust's collapse. She was the hunter, and they were running out of time. The Global Trust Corp Tower was a distant silhouette against the dusk, its glass spires mocking the chaos Grace Adebayo had unleashed. But now she crouched in the rusted shadows of an abandoned warehouse on the city's edge, her breath shallow, her janitor's uniform swapped for a black jacket and jeans, the weight of her double life heavier than the stun pen in her pocket, because the assassin who trailed her through the skyscraper's veins was here, his presence a cold promise of death. And Grace, the UN special agent who toppled empires with a single code, knew this was no longer a game of shadows, it was a fight for survival. The warehouse smelled of oil and decay, its cavernous interior a maze of crates and broken machinery, the perfect trap for a killer. And Grace's heart pounded as she recalled the Soul Team's warning. The Belize transfer she'd rerouted had gutted Harlan's escape, but it had also painted a bullseye on her back. And this assassin ex-Special Forces, likely hired by Harlan or Cole, was no amateur. His silenced pistol and Predator's gait, a testament to a career built on blood. Her earpiece crackled with static. Geneva's last message, grim hard drive in warehouse. Lists all accounts. Secure it. Evade hostile. The hard drive, a digital Rosetta Stone of Global Trust's money laundering network, was her final piece, hidden by a panicked board member who'd tried to defect. And Grace needed it to seal the raid set for 6 p.m. But the assassin was a step ahead, his boots scraping the concrete, his shadow flickering across a rusted beam. She'd faced death before cartels in Lagos, traitors in Moscow, but this felt different, personal. The weight of Lila's betrayal, Cole's interrogation, and the smudged contract all converging, her cover fraying like thread. And now Harlan's empire was fighting back with lethal precision. Her MI6 training surged, her body low, her eyes scanning for the hard drive's drop point, a metal case under a conveyor belt. But the assassin was closing in, his silhouette sharp against the warehouse's broken windows. And Grace knew running wasn't an option. Not with the raids hours away, not with the world counting on her evidence. She slipped behind a crate, her fingers brushing the stun pen, its charge too weak for a prolonged fight. But her real weapon was the environment pipes, chains. The warehouse's decay, and she'd turn it into a battlefield. The assassin's voice cut through the dark, low and taunting. I know you're here, janitor. Harlan wants your head, and Grace's blood froze, because that meant Harlan knew, her identity exposed, likely through a hack into her burner phone's metadata, a mistake she hadn't seen coming. Her pulse roared, but panic was a luxury she'd never afford. She grabbed a rusted chain, its weight cold in her hands, and swung it low, tripping the assassin as he rounded the crate, his curse sharp as he stumbled, his pistol clattering across the floor. She lunged, her stun pen jabbing his thigh, the electric snap dropping him to his knees. But he was fast, his fists slamming into her ribs, pain exploding as she staggered back, the warehouse spinning, her breath ragged but her resolve iron. He rose, a knife flashing in his hand, its blade catching the faint light, and Grace dove behind a stack of barrels, her hands scrambling for the hard drive's case, her fingers closing around its cold metal just as the assassin's knife grazed her shoulder, a hot sting that fueled her fire. She kicked a barrel, sending it crashing into him, the impact buying her seconds to sprint for the conveyor belt, her body sliding under its rusted frame. The hard drive clutched tight, her earpiece screaming with Geneva's voice. Extract now! Harlan's mobilizing, but Grace wasn't leaving without finishing this. She looped back, using the warehouse's echoes to disorient the assassin, her chains swinging again, catching his wrist, the knife flying free as she tackled him, her knee driving into his chest, her stun pen pressed to his neck, its final charge enough to knock him out cold. Her chest heaved, blood dripping from her shoulder, the hard drive heavy in her hand. But victory was bitter. Her phone buzzed with a hacked message, Harlan's voice chilling. I know who you are. Adebayo, you're done. The warehouse seemed to shrink, the raids looming, her cover blown, Cole's hunt tightening, and Lila's betrayal a distant echo. But the hard drive was hers, its data a death knell for Global Trust's network. She staggered to the exit, uploading the drive's contents to Geneva via a secure link. Her message curt, drive secured, identity compromised, advise. The reply was a blade hold until raids, neutralize threats. Grace leaned against the warehouse wall, the assassin's body still, her shoulder throbbing. Harlan's threat a noose, but she'd survived. And the raids were coming, she was the storm, and Global Trust's end was near. The Global Trust Corp tower gleamed like a false idol in the twilight, its glass walls a facade for the rot within. But Grace Adebayo was no longer the janitor skulking in its shadows. She stood in a black tactical vest, her shoulder bandaged from the warehouse fight, her eyes burning with the fire of a woman who'd clawed through betrayal, bullets, and her own blown cover to bring an empire to its knees. Her heart pounding as she led a UN task force through the city's underbelly, their vans converging on the skyscraper where Richard Harlan and his board still schemed, unaware that the woman they'd mocked was about to crash their world. The warehouse victory had cost her. Her shoulder throbbed. Harlan's chilling threat, "I know who you are," Adebayo echoed in her mind. And the hard drive's data had confirmed global trust crimes, but also hinted at a deeper secret, a thread tying the pension fund theft to a government official, a revelation that could shake nations. And Grace knew this raid wasn't just about justice, it was about exposing a truth too big to bury. Her earpiece buzzed with Geneva's orders. Raid at 6 p.m., arrest all board members, secure Harlan, the hard drive, the contract photos, and her intercepted emails were in Interpol's hands. But Harlan's knowledge of her identity, likely from a hack into her burner phone, meant he'd be ready, his hired muscle lurking. Vincent Cole's CIA instincts primed, and Grace felt the weight of every choice: Lila's betrayal, the smudged contract, the assassin's knife pressing against her, a reminder that one misstep could end her mission or her life. The van screeched to a halt at the tower's service entrance. Her team, 10 operatives, armed and silent, moving like a single organism. Their boots soft on the concrete as Grace signaled the breach, her micro tool disabling the security grid, the same grid she'd mapped as a janitor. Every vent in blind spot now her weapon. The lobby was a ghost town, the night shift sparse. But Cole's guards patrolled the executive floor, and Grace's pulse surged as she led her team up the service stairwell. Her stun pen swap beat for a compact pistol, its weight a grim necessity after the warehouse. Her team fanned out, disabling cameras, neutralizing guards with precision. But Grace's focus was the boardroom, where Harlan and his cabal were shredding files, their voices a frantic hum through her earpiece's feed, Harlan barking, "Burn it all. Washington won't save us if this gets out." The words hit like a shockwave, confirming the government link, and Grace's resolve hardened, her Lagos roots screaming for justice, for the workers robbed, for her family's loss, for every soul crushed by men like Harlan. The boardroom doors loomed, glass and steel, and Grace gave the signal, her team blasting through with flashbangs, the room erupting in smoke and screams as the board 12 men in suits, their faces bound with shock, froze. Harlan at the head, his silver hair glinting, his eyes locking on Grace. Recognition dawning like a blade. Her voice cut through the chaos, cold and commanding. "Richard Harlan, I'm Grace Adebayo, director of the UN Financial Crime Agency. You're under arrest for embezzlement, money laundering, and treason." The room seemed to shrink, the board's gasps drowned by her team's shouts, operatives cuffing executives. But Harlan's sneer was a viper's, his voice low. "You think you've won, janitor. The senator who signed off on that fund will bury you." The revelation landed like a bomb. The pension fund tied to a U.S. senator, a cover-up that explained the cartel fronts, the untouchable accounts. And Grace's mind raced, her gun steady as she stepped closer, her face inches from Harlan's. "Your senator's next. Nobody's untouchable." But Harlan wasn't done. He lunged for a desk drawer, his hand closing around a hidden pistol, and Grace reacted on instinct, her boots slamming into his wrist, the gun skidding across the floor. Her team pinning him as he roared. "You'll never leave this building alive." The threat was real. Cole burst through a side door, his own gun raised, his loyalty to Harlan clear. But Grace was faster, her pistol's aim locking on his chest, her voice a blade. "Drop it, Cole, or you're next." The standoff was a heartbeat, Cole's eyes flickering with doubt, the board's chaos a backdrop, and he lowered his weapon, cuffed by her team, the room secured. But Harlan's words about the senator gnawed at her. A secret too big for one raid. A fight that would outlive this night. Her team swept the room, seizing laptops, files, a burner phone with calls to Washington, and Grace's earpiece crackled with Geneva's confirmation, board detained. Senator ID'd, proceed to extract. But Harlan's final glare, as he was dragged away, was a promise of vengeance. And Grace felt the weight of the new battle ahead, her identity exposed, her shoulder aching, the government's shadow looming. She stepped into the hallway, the tower's lights flickering, her team's vans waiting, and sent a final message to Geneva: takedown complete. Senator Link confirmed. Advise? The reply was stark. Neutralize exposure. New mission inbound. Grace stood in the tower's shadow, the boardroom's glass walls a shattered dream. Her victory absolute but incomplete, because the senator's name was a spark, and she just lit a fire that could burn the world. The safe house was a concrete tomb on the city's edge, its peeling walls and flickering bulb a stark contrast to the Global Trust Corp Tower's glass grandeur, where Grace Adebayo had shattered an empire. But now she sat hunched over a rickety table, her bandaged shoulder throbbing from the assassin's knife, her black hoodie a far cry from the janitor's uniform that had cloaked her as the UN's International Financial Crime Agency director. Her heart heavy with a victory that felt like a pyre. Because toppling Harlan, cuffing Cole, and exposing the pension fund theft hadn't silenced the ghosts of her past or the senator's shadow that loomed like a guillotine. And every breath was a battle between the warrior she'd become and the girl from Lagos who'd once dreamed of a world worth saving. The city's neon pulse bled through the cracked window, a distant hum of life she couldn't touch. Her safe house a fortress of solitude cluttered with monitors flashing headlines, CNN blaring global trust collapses, fraud scandal rocks markets, Al Jazeera detailing Interpol sweeps in Dubai and Zurich, but the words felt hollow. The pension fund restored, the workers saved. Yet the senator's name, whispered by Harlan in his final sneer, was a locked door, a U.S. power broker tied to cartel fronts and Russian accounts, a truth Grace couldn't yet crack, and the weight of her double life pressed against her ribs, a cage built from Lila's betrayal, the smudged contract, the warehouse blood, every moment that had carved her into a weapon. Her burner phone lay silent, its screen dark since Geneva's last order, lie low, Senator probe active. New mission inbound, and Grace's fingers traced the scar on her shoulder, the pain a tether to the assassin's blade, to Cole's interrogation, to Lila's desperate choice. Each a reminder that trust was a luxury she'd lost long before Lagos fell to corruption. Her family's laughter drowned by greedy men not unlike Harlan, whose silver hair and venomous eyes still haunted her dreams. His threat, you'll never leave alive, a prophecy she'd defied but couldn't forget. The safe house smelled of stale coffee and gun oil, its walls pinned with evidence Harlan's emails, the hard drive's account lists, a grainy photo of the senator shaking hands with a cartel boss, and Grace's mind churned. Replaying the raid, her voice slicing through the boardroom's chaos. I'm Grace Adebayo, and you're under arrest. The board's gasps. Harlan's lunge for a gun, Cole's surrender. Every second a blaze of power. But now alone. She felt the kin, her identity exposed, her cover blown by Harlan's hack. The senator's network a hydra she'd only wounded. Her earpiece crackled, a secure line from Geneva, and her contact's voice was clipped, Hong Kong. Crypto exchange linked to the senator's oligarchs. You're the lead. Dossiers en route. The mission was a spark, a chance to chase the senator's trail, to burn the next empire, but also a chain, tethering her to a life of shadows. And Grace's heart faltered, her eyes drifting to a faded photo taped to the wall her mother in Lagos, smiling under a mango tree. A memory from before corruption stole their home, their joy, their everything. And the sight cracked something in her. A question she'd buried under MI6 training and UN missions: was justice worth her soul? Or was she just another pawn in a game too big to win? The safe house felt like a noose, its monitors looping footage of Global Trust's fall workers cheering. Harlan in cuffs. Cole's mugshot, but the senator's absence in the news was a slap, his power shielding him, and Grace's fingers clenched, her Legos fire clashing with her exhaustion. The girl who'd vowed to fix the world, now a ghost who broke it. She stood, pacing the creaking floor, her reflection in a cracked mirror showing a face etched with resolve but shadowed by doubt, her shoulders paying a metronome to her thoughts. And she replayed Lila's betrayal, the 10 grand that bought her silence, a choice Grace couldn't hate, because Lila was a mother, not a monster, trapped like Grace's own family had been. And the memory stung, a reminder that her war wasn't just against men like Harlan, but a system that turned good people into pawns. Her phone buzzed again, the dossier arriving Hong Kong's crypto kingpin, a Russian oligarch, a network dwarfing Global Trust, and Grace's pulse quickened. The thrill of the hunt waking her, but also the dread, the knowledge that each mission that stole another piece of her left her more alone, more untethered, her mother's smile fading with every step into the dark. She opened the dossier, its pages detailing encrypted wallets, shell companies, the senator's coded emails, and her mind sharpened, cross-referencing with the hard drive's data, seeing the threads of a conspiracy that could topple governments, but also the risk, the oligarch's private army, the senator's reach. And Grace wondered if this was her last fight, if Hong Kong would be her grave or her redemption. She typed a reply to Geneva mission accepted, deploying 48 hours, senator priority. The response was stark: neutralize exposure, no leaks, trust no one. The words were a knife. Trust no one, her mantra since Lagos, since Lila, since the boardroom's sneers. And Grace felt the walls closing. Her double life a paradox. She was the storm that felled empires, but also a woman adrift. Her victories Pyrrhic without a soul to share them. She packed her gear: micro camera, new stun pen, a forged passport, her movements precise. But her heart lingered on the senator, a name she'd hunt after Hong Kong, a vow to finish what Global Trust started, because stopping meant letting her mother's ghost down, letting Lagos down, letting herself down. The headlines would fade, the workers would rebuild, Harlan and Cole would rot, but the senator's network was a cancer, and Grace was the scalpel, no longer just a janitor or a director, but a force, a woman who had chosen the fight over peace, the mission over love. She paused at the photo of her mother, her fingers brushing its edge, a goodbye she couldn't voice, and slipped it into her pocket, a piece of her past she'd carry, a spark to keep her going. The safe house door clicked shut, the city's neon swallowing her as she stepped into the night, her new mission a beacon, but also a burden. And Grace Adebayo, the reckoning, vanished into the shadows, ready to burn the next empire, knowing the war would never end, but neither would her fire. From a cleaner to a global power, her secret shook the world. Thanks for listening. Like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more thrilling stories.